Greetings. Coming to you live from SportsZone Chicago virtual studios, I am Jamar Harp, and this is Sports101, the show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Here we like to expand our conversation to include the history, past, present, as well as in the making, and we also look at the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on social media at Coach_Harp412 and Facebook under Jamar Harp. Please get social with Sports101 and a litany of other shows on SportsZone Chicago by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. SportsZone Chicago can be found on Twitter at SportsZoneCHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, subscribe to our YouTube page, search SportsZone Chicago. If you want to keep up with your favorite sports team, watch one of our flagship shows such as Sean and Maya in the Morning, or just anything you missed, just go to YouTube and search SportsZone Chicago. All your needs will be met. Now, after you do that, I need everyone to download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now I'd like to talk to you about this week's episode entitled The English League Championship of Soccer, Promotion and Relegation. Now, the Premier League spots are worth tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, especially in this current cycle where you're seeing Saudi princesses, Russian oligarchs, Chinese business moguls, all vying for ownership in the Premier League. So when it comes to promotion and relegation in the top flight of English soccer, everything is on the line. Entering the stretch run of this season, the 2021-2022 season, the battle for places and next season's Premier League is heating up. In the Premier League, one team has already gone down, and there's another one soon to follow. The third team to go down will come from one of these three: Everton, Burnley, or Leeds United. In the second division English Championship League, the two automatic promotion spots given to the league winner, which was this year Fulham, and the second place runner-up Bournemouth. The first two are clinch automatic spots into the Champions League, the Premier League, and then there's a playoff for the third and final spot through teams 3 through 6 in the championship. So Bournemouth and Shoe, they'll be moving up this past week, clinching one of those top two spots. Now, the next four best teams in this second division, again, the teams ranked 3 through 6 will all advance to a promotional playoff, which will decide a third and final team to earn this multi-lucrative billion-dollar jump to the Premier League. Now, Norwich City was the first team to suffer relegation this year in the Premier League, dropping down to the second division just after one season of earning promotion. Now, this is often you see this, and these clubs are called yo-yo clubs because, again, they'll spend 1 year in the Premier League, then go back to the Championship, back to the Premier League, etc. The main reason is not having the funds to buy the super teams that, again, some of these Russian oligarchs, Saudi princesses, and Chinese business moguls, and even with American businessmen with ownership in Liverpool, they just don't have the money to compete. Now, Norwich is going to be followed by Watford, and they're given a greater than 99% chance of being relegated. The third and final trapdoor to the championship will see, again, one of these three: Burnley, Everton, or Leeds United facing the drop. Now, Burnley, which has a 21% chance of relegation, and all these numbers come from 538 Sports. They have surged of late with 3 straight wins recently to jump out of a relegation spot, with Leeds United at 45%, now the favorites to fall to the championship. When you look at Everton, their unexpected win over Chelsea cut their chances of relegation to just 34%. And originally before that game, it was 63%. But they also have a game in hand, so they have one game up on the competition, so they got to see how it's unfolding. So with the 3 teams dropping from the Premier League, obviously there's going to be 3 teams coming up from the Championship to replace them. The Championship is the second-tier division of the English football pyramid, and they automatically send the top 2 finishers to the Premier League again, with a third place decided between the representatives between third and sixth place in that year's championship standings. The third team, again, is determined via this promotional playoff, with the teams finishing 3 through 6 in this knockout elimination tournament. Now, the playoff final was a massive spectacle, with the income generated in the Premier League proving a game changer for these teams stuck in a championship. So getting into this playoff final and winning it changes your fortunes, because once you're in the Premier League, you get a percentage of television revenues along with revenues of just being in the league. So you might gain $100 billion just for being, in the Premier League. Now, this playoff final, again, between the teams 3 through 6 is said to be upwards of over $100 million for the teams that play in it, again, with the winner advancing to the Premier League and reaping the rewards of the top flight championship leagues revenue sharing and also their parachute payments. So Fulham, they won the 2021-22 championship, clinching the automatic promotion to the Premier League this year. Bournemouth, they clinched the second automatic spot with one match left in the season, and this was done last weekend, staving off a late challenge from Nottingham Forest, who have clinched a playoff spot alongside Huddersfield. Now, there's 2 more playoff spots up for grab in this championship to get to the playoff final for this last Premier League spot. Now, Fulham has dominated the championship with a great attack, and this team from Cottage Craven was the first team to secure a spot in the top flight due to their overwhelming lead. I think they're up like 20-some points. Now, Bournemouth, they've been in long stretches of second place throughout the whole duration of this season. They needed a goal on almost penalty minutes to clinch the second place in the last automatic spot. Bournemouth will be back in the Premier League next season after this South Coast club sealed promotion from the championship with a 1-0 win over Nottingham Forest on Tuesday. Excuse me, I said this weekend, but it was actually Tuesday. In this game, Kiefer Moore scored the only goal of the game, and this was off a penalty kick straight from the training ground, as the commentators like to say, and this kick occurred with 7 minutes left of the 90 on the board to send Bournemouth fans into ecstasy, per se, again, getting their team promoted to the Premier League. So let's check out this goal right here by Kiefer Moore and sending the Bournemouth to the Premier League with just 7 minutes left in the game. Now, unpacking that video, you see Nottingham. They had some great chances. They hit the wood one time, and also there was a kick save on the goal line. And then Bournemouth's classic, that was, again, a classic display of drawing of a penalty in training, how I work in the game, a short corner to a defense that's trying to rotate to the ball, then the ball being hit with a little outswinging curve to get past the goalie and the far post of the net is, job well done. Now that result, and obviously at the end you saw how the Bournemouth fans stormed the pitch, similar to an NCAA basketball or a college football game at the joy and excitement of their league again, their team again being back in the Premier League, Now that result meant Bournemouth are guaranteed to claim the second automatic promotion place ahead of Nottingham Forest and behind already crowned champions Fulham. Now, Nottingham Forest, they still have a chance to get to the Premier League, but they have to go through the promotion knockout playoff. They're joined by Huddersfield, which was the first team to mathematically secure a spot in a 4-team playoff. Luton Town and Sheffield United are also in prime position to get 2 of the other spots on the final day. Middlesbrough and Millwall will be hoping to take advantage of any slip-ups by winning on the road in this last match weekend, which is coming up this weekend. Let's see here. Now, this picture right here is a Fulham team from Cottage Craven. They've been promoted back into the Premier League after their last victory. Again, they can't be mathematically caught. Last weekend, they beat Preston 3-0. Now, the side, they took the Sky Bet Championship by storm this season before securing promotion in that last home game Tuesday, and they still have 4 games left. This is the club's 3rd promotion in 5 seasons. So, again, this is a classic example of a yo-yo club being promoted 3 times in 5 seasons, with both of their previous top flight campaigns ended in relegation, meaning they couldn't stay longer than 1 year. Now, this year, the Marco Silva-led club of Fulham returns to the big league with 4 matches to spare following, again, this victory on April 19th at their home stadium of Craven Cottage. Fulham this year has won 26 matches and scored 98 goals so far, with a goal difference of 30 more than second-place Bournemouth. However, the Cottagers have been still, as we stated earlier, a yo-yo club, going up and down in the Premier League the last 5 years. And their head coach Silva admitted the challenge of staying in the Premier League is difficult. So here I want to show a video, a quick highlight of the Fulham Cottagers this year, the champions of the English Championship League.
Breaking news to bring you. Marco Silva is now the new Fulham boss.
So it's his 4th job in English football. Is it fair to say, Neil, that he's got a point to prove in English football still, Marco Silva?
I think so. I think there are 3 Premier League jobs, left them all.
When a club got relegated, it's always a tough season, and of course we as a club we want to go back to Premier League as soon as we can.
Promotion, the obsession for Fulham. Anything else is unthinkable. They know the drill, they've read this script before, and now with a new leading man, they hope for another blockbuster championship season. There is a real feel-good factor at Craven Cottage at the side of the Thames. Sherry, Wilson. There goes Dennis Adoy. It's brilliant from Mitrovic. Ivano's cross, Mitrovic! It's a league he loves. It's a league which fears him. Just another day at the office for Alexander Mitrovic. Fulham make their move.
This goal-scoring phenomenon goes on and on and on. 18 for the season, a second hat-trick in his last 6 games. There is just no stopping him.
We've gone toe-to-toe with the best team in the division.
Best team who smashed everybody left, right and centre all over.
They are by far the best team, aren't they?
Well, 100%.
If it was before the game and it's a draw against Fulham, most team in this league, even the second, best team will be happy.
Another game, another win, another step towards their desired destination, and another bucket load of goals. It has been a stunning night. Blackburn Rovers 0, Fulham 7.
Well, what a result in the Championship. Fulham's bid to win automatic promotion to the Premier League is back on track after they hammered Reading 7-0.
So Fulham scored 7 against Blackburn Rovers, 7 against Reading. I don't think he'll get very long odds against them getting 7 today.
Honestly, Jeff, they are so ruthless. They just want more and more.
Fulham have gone 5 points clear at the top of the Championship after they thrashed Birmingham 6-2.
Fulham have had quite a week, 7 days, 3 games and 19 goals. Yes, 19
goals well played.
Wilson standing over this, swung in by Wilson, and somehow Mitrovic got free. The greatest goal scorer the Championship has seen. Fulham are 2 wins away from football paradise. 2 wins from glory.
Full time, they are officially a Premier League side. Fulham 3, Preston 0. Fulham have done it at the first attempt. They're going back to the Premier League, and what a job Marco Silva has done. 98 goals they've scored this season.
Fantastic the achievement, but I'm really proud the way we did it.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm Jamar Harp, and this is Sports 101. That show looks at sport beyond the X's and O's. Now, that video, you saw a great Fulham team in the Championship, but to put it in perspective for anyone that doesn't follow the Premier League or English football, think of, let's say, the last place team in the SEC, Vanderbilt. If they finish last place, they get kicked out the SEC and have to go play in the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the SWAC. Now they win the Southwestern Athletic Conference and they go back to the SEC, but they still have the same players. So that's sort of what these English teams face. You can see all the goals they scored in the Championship because, again, they have a team with players that either come from the Premier League, got cut, etc. So they go to the top teams in the Championship. So just as there's a disparity in the Premier League and the Championship with the top teams in the middle tier and bottom tier, that disparity is even greater. So here you'll see teams that on the top, as a player stated, if you get a draw with them, even a second place team would consider that a great day because so much depth and athleticism they had for the Championship. Now, if you took that same team and those same players and put them in the Premier League where you have bigger, faster, stronger athletes, of course, the goals would go down. They wouldn't score 100-some goals in the Premier League. And oftentimes teams change their style of play. They might get in a more defensive formation, such as a 4-5-1, and only try to counterattack because they don't have the athletes to go toe-to-toe with some of these big market teams. Again, I am Jamar Harp, and this is Sports 101. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come back. We'll talk about some economic ramifications that affect teams that are being relegated or promoted from the English Premier League to the Championship. This is Sports 101. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Please stop and listen because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773
Compassion, noun. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. We're all born with it. It's in us. Don't believe me? When you hear a baby cry, something pulls at you. You want to ease that pain. You want to soothe that hurt. No one had to teach you that. It's called compassion, and it's in you. However, at some point you turned it off when it came to me. Me.
The cries of my soul have gone unheard, but today, you will hear me.
My heart has wailed a melody loud enough to shatter your ears, and you ignored me. But this week, you will hear me.
This body has beat the drums of anguish, only to be silenced. But this month, you will hear me.
This year,
this decade,
this century,
I will be heard, and
you will be the one to hear me.
And when I am finally heard,
show compassion.
Show compassion.
Show compassion.
Remember, it's in you.
You see me.
You hear me.
Respect me.
Respect. Due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others.
We don't have to agree, but I deserve to be heard. I stand my ground. Respect me.
We don't have to be friends, but I deserve your civility. I stand my ground. Respect me.
You don't have to understand my culture, but I deserve to be authentically myself. I stand my ground. Respect me.
I stand in defiance of your need to make me less in order for you to feel adequate.
I stand
aware that the America that you see and love today is a result of my free labor.
I stand
knowing that the contempt you have for me was not instigated by me, but perpetuated by the fear you have of me. I
stand surviving your many attempts to emasculate me. Indeed, I thrive despite it.
I stand realizing that you take many things from me, but I will not allow you to take my respect.
I am a man.
I am a proud man.
I am a proud black man.
I am authentically, undisputedly, unapologetically a proud black man.
I am authentically, undisputedly, unapologetically a proud black man.
I am authentically, undisputably, unapologetically a proud black man.
Respect me. I have done more than enough to deserve it, and still you withhold it.
The bill is past due.
You owe me.
Respect me. Respect me.
Respect me.
the Chicago way.
Greetings and welcome back to this week's episode of Sports 101, the show that discusses sports beyond the X's and O's. We talk about the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective, and also through the lens of history in the past, present, as well as in the making. Please sure you get social with Sports 101, SportsZone Chicago, and its litany of shows by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. SportsZone Chicago can be found on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Search SportsZone Chicago. But more importantly, everyone needs to download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found on the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now, before the break, we talked about relegation and promotion. Now we're going to focus more on the economics of promotion and relegation. Now, again, promotion to the Premier League usually fills wide-eyed players and supporters with excitement at the thought of facing some of these biggest names clubs, going to Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, all these big-name teams and the top flight players, and also becoming being financially lucrative for the team and its players from participating in the Premier League. Now, there was an analysis conducted by Deloitte Sports Business Group, and it revealed before the Aston Villa and Derby County playoff final 2 years ago that the winner would benefit from an additional $170 million of revenue by moving up to the Premier League. So that's, again, just by going to the league, you're getting $170 million around in revenue. If the promoted club was to survive their first season and not yo-yo and go back down to the championship, the increase in the financial revenue could reach around $300 million between years 2 to 4 and 5. Again, because the longer you stay in the Premier League, the more revenue sharing you get, a greater percentage, so you can have more money to get some of these top flight players. There's a huge injection of cash, again, that mostly arrives from broadcasting and commercial revenues generated from contracts from sponsors such as NBC, Sky Sports, etc. In the 10 seasons, including 2018 and 19, there's been a total of 19 clubs out of 30 that have avoided relegation from the Premier League in their first season. So most clubs, after they're promoted, usually go back down. The 2017-18 season was the first time in 6 seasons where all 3 promoted clubs, which were that year Newcastle, Brighton, and Huddersfield, were able to stay past 1 year. Of this season's new pupils, Aston Villa has displayed the most financial might and shown them the greatest chance of staying on. Recently, Villa's new owners, Nafis Sawarsis and Wes Edens, who are reportedly billionaires, have injected around $57 million into the club, again, to improve training, infrastructure, and get these top flight players. Since they took control from the previous ownership group ran by Tony Zhao, the duo are thought to have invested around $250 million into the 1982 European champions. So before they owned it, they were owned by a Chinese majority investor. Again, it's a level of influence which has been reflected by manager Dean Smith's spending over the summer transfer window. Now Aston Villa's transfer outlay has climbed to $133 million. Now you think that's a lot, but when you compare that to some of the other teams, in particular Newcastle United, who is owned by that Saudi delegation. That's very minuscule in regards to the top flight of the Premier League. This also comes from paying $22 million for striker Wesley from Club Brugge, and that's just one player. And then they paid $20 million for another player, a central defender, Tyrone Mings from Bournemouth. In return, they received little or no proceeds from their player sales. So again, they're spending money and not getting none in return because they don't have anything anyone wants because they're just coming from the championship. Now, there's two other clubs who achieve automatic promotion from the Premier League. That 2020 season, they spent a relative pittance compared to the other teams. Norwich City's highest transfer paid in the summer was 2.7, and that was only a loan for goalkeeper Ralph Farman. So their philosophy is they're not trying to spend a lot of money because they feel like they won't have any money left over. And if you're going to go down, they're going to go down anyway. So they're going to try to get strategic players that fit their mindset. Now, the Norwich City Canaries have only spent $3.75 million overall. So, again, you got one team spending $100 million and going down, and one team spending around $4 million and going down. So, different strokes for different folks. Now, Sheffield United have been far less than these other two, with an outlay of just under $43 million, signing forward Oliver McBurney from Swansea for $17 million. Now, the wealth of these clubs and significant investment in the squads can be risky strategy, again, if the judgment calls are wrong on the players and they don't guarantee safety from relegation. So you're going to spend all this money and get relegated. The players are going to jump ship, and now you're left with nothing. In recent times, we've seen how spending a considerable amount of money can result in very opposite fortunes. So what are we talking about? So here we got Wolverhampton Wolves, who were backed by a Chinese conglomerate by the name of Fosun International. And here are some top executives from Fosun International right here. And now let's check a quick video out on the Chinese involvement in the English Premier League.
Over recent years, football supporters in the Midlands will have noticed the steady march of Chinese investment into British football. Wolverhampton Wanderers and West Bromwich Albion are both under Chinese ownership, and Birmingham City remain under the control of Trillion Trophy Asia, a holding company from Hong Kong. Now, given the prevalence of foreign owners in the modern game, particularly the Premier League, and China's growing relevance within the sport, these are hardly remarkable developments. Yet the political machinations of faceless officials in the committee rooms of government in Beijing are probably much closer to these clubs than supporters realise. Wolves and West Brom are part of West Midlands conurbation, the third largest population centre in Britain, with a population of almost 2.5 million people. It is a strategically important region, linking north and south, at the heart of which, of course, is Birmingham, the country's second largest city behind London. The region is not only in need of infrastructural investment, it is also playing a pivotal role in the British government's flagship infrastructural project, the High Speed 2 rail link. China has already invested in the West Midlands transport network, for instance by helping to fund improvements to a rail freight link from Southampton. This makes it much easier to get Chinese products from one of Britain's biggest deep-water ports to one of Britain's biggest freight hubs. It also provides some indications about the underpinning motives of football club owners from China, who've also recently acquired Southampton. In 2017, one of these club owners reached an agreement with government in Beijing to construct the country's first ever private high-speed rail link. By April this year, the corporation involved had finalised a $4.2 billion financing for the project. The corporation in question is Fosun, the Chinese conglomerate that owns Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, it could be sheer coincidence, but Wolverhampton is also home to the former headquarters of the now liquidated Carillion, a British company that was responsible for leading construction of High Speed 2. In March 2019, stories emerged that China had expressed a willingness to take over the HS2 project, a British official having travelled to meet the representatives of the China Railway Corporation. One of state-owned CRC's closest formal strategic partners is Fosun. Now, HS2 will be a vast project. The first phase from London to Birmingham will cost £27 billion. The second phase from Birmingham northwards will cost a further £29 billion. For China, its government and some of its biggest businesses, this would be a hugely lucrative contract to secure. Of course, Fosun's ownership of Wolves has been very well received to this point. The club have built a competitive side. They are currently qualified for the Europa League and last season reached the semi-finals of the FA Cup. Unlike many foreign-owned clubs, supporters have also been encouraged by the levels of communication between the owners and their new community. But perhaps it isn't football that Fosun's senior executives are specifically interested in. Maybe the Chinese government is exercising some degree of control over Fosun in the same way that it has in overseeing stadium developments in fuel-rich countries hosting the Africa Cup of Nations over the past decade. Could it be that Fosun bought Wolves principally as a means to much greater ends? Well, none of this should be a surprise, as we have already witnessed Chinese investors openly admit to acquiring European clubs for reasons other than football alone. In one case, some Chinese company officials wryly observed how they had bought the Czech Republic with beer and football when CEF Energy acquired a brewer, the Pivovari Lobkowicz Group, as well as the country's leading club, Slavia Prague. Crucially, CEFC explained how football was an important means of driving its business interests in Central and Eastern Europe. Later, a Chinese organization with ambiguous links to its government, Sinobo, took over the running of the Czech club. Coincidentally, in 2017, Sinobo also acquired Beijingguan of the Chinese Super League, overnight making it one of the world's most expensive clubs. Though some might question the motives and limits of China's football investments, football fans should be in no doubt about the scale of the country's involvement in the sport. There is reportedly some affection for the game amongst the country's top politicians, and of course President Xi Jinping is an avid fan. However, it is the country's size and voracious appetite for resources and political power that is the real driving force behind its investments. Hence, as fans sit watching football in stadiums from Franceville to Southampton, it is likely that a deep water port, reserve of oil deposits, or a major rail development is never very far away.
Now that video was very, very, very interesting. In it, you saw a lot of different things, but mainly they talked about China's need for goods and resources. And, most countries are rated on their imports as well as their exports. And we know China exports a lot all around the world. And they use their business prowess along with helping others to take advantage of individuals' natural resources. So similar like what they're doing in some West African countries, they'll give millions of dollars to develop infrastructure in which their goods can be sold to that particular country, or they can import natural resources that they don't have, such as rice, sugar, rubber, the cobalt from the Congo to make a lot of the electronics, in particular phones. So basically the involvement would try to drain this Midlands area of economic resources and have it all go back to China. Now, in regards to the pitch, this Chinese investment groups proceeded on a spending spree that first year after promotion, over $100 million. Johnny Otto was the most expensive acquisition. He was bought at under $18.5 million from Atletico Madrid. They also got defenseman Willie Boley in his older years, so they got him cheap from Porto for $11 million. And then Molyneux, they got João Moutinho for only $5 million. Again, he's an up-and-coming player at the time, so that was pretty cheap. So that summer, Wolves backed that spending with a further outlay, spending an additional $86 million, and they got Raul Jimenez for $34 million. Now, that year, Fulham showed that money isn't everything in regards to what they did, which is kind of the opposite. Now, despite an ambitious outlay, their season turned into disaster. Now, Fulham, which is a West London team, they splashed out under $105 million in trying to secure promotion, and not get relegated once they came up. And they assembled what they thought was at times a competitive squad. They got John Michael Seri from Nice for $27 million, and he was once thought to be a Barcelona player or to get sold to Barcelona. They also got Andrew Zambo and Gisa for $22 million from Marseille. Alfie Mauswan for $15 million. And, they thought they were building a squad that could compete. There also was a loan fee paid for German international Andre Schürrle in a bold and transfer move. So that year, despite spending $100 million, Fulham only finished 19th place, accumulating just 26 points the whole season. They had 3 managers, including the appointment of Claudio Ranieri, who just lasted 106 days. Mawson, one of their top signings, missed 5 months of the season with a freak injury, and Sears went on loan to Galatasaray. Bournemouth, on the other hand, they took a different approach since their promotion in that 2014-15 season. In their inaugural season in the top flight, they only spent $49 million. And in line for transfer and inflation, that was a minuscule sum. Yet since they've remained in the Premier League through spending less, $36 million in 2016 and 17, and $31 million in 2017 and 18. Now the Cherries of Bournemouth, they bought 4 more players alongside loan deals, which is a thrifty way to buy people for only $50 million. So 4 players for $50 million. That's like a happy meal or a value meal in professional soccer. And they were currently at that time sitting 10th in the table. Now let's take a look at the second season strains on these Premier League clubs. So when we talk about a second season strain, that's clubs that get promoted. They last the first year. Now year 2, they're trying to stay again. Now there was a great study done by Kieran Maguire from the University of Liverpool's Management School, who was an expert on sports and business finance. Now, Mr. Maguire said there's a strong correlation between investment and a club's performance in the table of the Premier League. And that's due to a combination of paying higher wages as well as getting better transfers that cost more money. This does not always work, as we saw with Fulham last season, although what tends to happen is that if you have more money to spend, you can afford to make more mistakes. We also saw this a few years back with Leicester City being top of the Premier League and having a fantasy season. They also saw that Cardiff went down the season prior without spending that much money. So it's a very challenging league to survive in, whether you spend or you are cheap once you get promoted. Mr. Maguire continued on to say that he thought there was such a thing as a second place syndrome in the Premier League, meaning if you ask chief executives that say that once a club gets promoted, they tend to start on the front foot, and players are very keen to prove themselves in the Premier League. But after a while of playing, they may revert back to this, again, defensive posture, trying to get draws and get 1 point instead of trying to win games, trying to tie games, which is, to me, takes away from the sport. Now, most people say it's not something that can last forever, and it can manifest itself in the second season in top flight. But again, without the money to bring in 4 or 5 players to compete, sometimes this isn't possible. What also tends to happen is that the wage bills go up in that second season, because you have players that say, I stayed with you true in the championship when you got relegated the last time. I didn't jump and go to another Premier League club and sit on the bench. I stayed with you. I played in the championship, horrible travel conditions compared to the Premier League, etc. I got you back to the Premier League. We played a whole season in the Premier League, and we're now not being relegated again, so now you got to double my salary. So this is another thing that affects these teams in the second season, that players want to be compensated because now this is their second year in the Premier League. The last issue we're going to talk about is Premier League and the championship and the financial disparities from each league. Now, in Deloitte's annual review of football finance for this year, the total revenues of the Premier League clubs reached $4.8 billion in 2017 and 18, and this was also boosted by shirt sales and sponsorship. Now, this was $4.8 billion in 2017 and 18. In 2022, these numbers are in the high teens to $20 billion in revenue generated by all teams in the Premier League. For this season, the total income projected to climb to is around $5.2 billion, with the average club turnover to increase by $20 million up to $261 million. And that's compared to 2 years ago. So this is what the clubs are average spending, 261. Now, this is just a median average. Obviously, you have the super clubs that spend a lot more. Now, there's a more telling statistic, and that's the championship clubs get a parachute payment after relegation from the Premier League. And their revenues were an average of $51 million for 2017 to 18, and that dropped to $21 million for those without the payment. So according to the Premier League rule book, every club in the league is entitled to an equal share of the revenue created through the broadcasting rights and one share of each income from overseas television rights. So the parachute payments were implemented to ensure that a relegated club could adjust their finances to the realities of no longer receiving the Premier League returns and have something so they can operate in the championship. So in the first season after relegation, a relegated club can receive 55% of the earnings that they would have got if they stayed in the Premier League. So basically, if you get relegated, you get half of what all the Premier League teams got from being in the Premier League that season. Now, that number fell to 45% in the second season after relegation and 20% after the third season. So the more seasons you spend after relegation, the less parachute payments you get until they eventually stop. Now, if a club fails to avoid the drop in the first season in top flight, then they will not be entitled to receive the third season after relegation, which is the 20% payment. Now, this year, the champions were Manchester City, and they accumulated a little bit under $151 million from the Premier League that season and received the most in merit payments and facility fees for finishing, the top flight. Huddersfield, despite propping up the other 19 teams in the league, coming in at the end, they still collected $98 million for finishing last place in the Premier League. So that questions what needs to be done to ensure that there's a more competitive balance financially between clubs that enter into the Premier League from the championship, meaning they need more money to compete, and also between the clubs in the Premier League and the championship as a whole. Now, Kieran Maguire also stated that while he thinks that there are merits and more equity between the leagues, redistribution of wealth will never happen, as the Premier League is an independent body and it's a members-only club. So the members of this club are fully aware that the global appeal comes from viewers wanting to watch Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, and not that many more teams. So there's not much interest in Crystal Palace, Bournemouth, or Watford. So therefore, the revenue sharing is not equal. Therefore, again, they don't feel they should share the money to a greater extent than they're doing right now. With such clubs that yo-yo back for the championship in the Premier League, they suggest getting, a billionaire owner to invest more money, such as Newcastle United just did. Now, again, the bottom place club in the Premier League received $98 million that season, and that was just from broadcasting income. And that's compared to some clubs in the championship who received $7 or $8 million altogether. So unless a club received a parachute payment. Now, there are further gaps between the clubs and the championship in the Premier League that extend beyond one team getting $98 million and one getting $7 million. So there is no will from the Premier League clubs to share this money out to any of the clubs who they don't feel is deserving of it because they're not in their league and they don't get that revenue share. And there's no demand or market to see them play. They have said that to the English Football League clubs that they're free to negotiate their own TV deals outside of the domestic and overseas deals that the leagues has, but they're not quite as popular enough. So this doesn't work. So in reality, the gap between the Premier League and the rest is only like in the Y. And again, as you get Saudi princesses, business moguls, Russian oligarchs, Chinese business tycoons, all invested in this league, not only to have a team, but to get some of the infrastructure and economic goods around London and greater England to be shipped to their home countries. Now, there's a situation where it presents newly promoted clubs the dilemma on whether to roll the dice and continue to open their checkbook or not. So in regards to that, we're going to watch a quick video on Premier League salary caps.
For the next few days, you can get 50% off a subscription to The Athletic. See the link in the description. The Premier League is one of the UK's most successful exports. But when it comes to actually making money, its clubs are less so. When Chelsea played Manchester City in the Champions League final in May, the match featured the two clubs that had made the highest pre-tax losses in Premier League history. Between them, Chelsea and City had lost over £1.5 billion. A price worth paying if you look in the trophy cabinet. But according to some, such spending reduces the sustainability of the domestic game as others play catch-up. The present profitability and sustainability rules, which most fans still refer to as financial fair play, is a break-even model. Clubs are allowed to lose £15 million pre-tax over a rolling 3-year period. However, certain costs, academy, community, women's team, infrastructure, are excluded, and owners are allowed to contribute via share issues a further £90 million over that 3-year period. So these rules do have some merit. But one of the flaws is that they are based on historic published financial accounts, which are not published until well after the end of the season. This means that if the Premier League does apply any sanctions, they are always after the event. Trophies, Champions League places and relegation will have been determined already. So an alternative is some form of spending cap. A hard cap, where there is a total wage limit that is the same for each club, is unworkable in the Premier League, where the range of the wage table is more than £250 million. Also, due to the Premier League elite seeing their competitors as the other big clubs in Europe rather than the small but reasonably established sides at home. A cap set at 20% over the average Premier League wage bill would give a figure of £193 million, which would only really affect 5 clubs. These clubs might legitimately claim that they were being held back on the European stage by such a policy and could easily afford to pay more. So the alternative is a soft cap, with wages linked to revenues. The Premier League's revenues were distorted in 2019-20, so a look at the figures for the season before shows that 7 clubs in 2018-19 were over the line, none of whom would have been impacted by the hard cap limit. However, wage caps ignore the impact of transfer fees on clubs. Players signed on Bosman deals are usually able to command higher wages as clubs look at the total cost of recruiting a player, which is both wages and amortization, transfer fee spread over contract life. Therefore, there is a case for taking transfer costs into consideration too. In La Liga, the economic cost control measures that operate there are forward-based. Clubs have to submit estimated figures for both their revenue, including player sales, and costs, including player purchases. La Liga's team of spreadsheet experts then analyse the estimates for reasonableness, looking at transfer values in the present market, for example. La Liga then gives the club a total sum that they can spend during the following season, but allows the clubs to allocate this between transfers and wages as they see fit. The formula used to determine the actual budget is a secret, but the main elements involve 4 financial metrics. Economic profitability, ordinary profit before tax divided by total assets, financial profitability, ordinary profit before tax divided by equity, general liquidity, current assets divided by liquid liabilities, and solvency, equity divided by total assets. Where La Liga rules show their teeth is that clubs have to register their players using an app as they are signed. If the wages and transfer fee result in the club exceeding the allowed limit, the app flashes red. This means that the club either have to reduce wages with existing squad members and/or sell a player so that the new recruit can be registered to play for the forthcoming season. So would this work in the Premier League? Well, it would require a vote to take place and a 2/3 majority to vote in favour, Whether clubs with ultra-high net worth owners such as Chelsea, Manchester City, Aston Villa or Everton would be keen to have such controls is uncertain. But if an independent football regulator is introduced as a result of the current situation, then this issue may be taken out of their hands and could be imposed. The Athletic has looked at the accounts of the 20 clubs who will form the Premier League in 2021-22 and has applied a much simpler version of the formula used by La Liga above to see the potential budgets that clubs would face in the forthcoming season. On the basis of these calculations, the Premier League spend on wages and transfers would fall by about £430 million compared to the most recent accounts for 2019-20. Those clubs that have had historic good control over costs would be rewarded, and the Big Six would still enjoy a substantial financial advantage over the other clubs. At the bottom end of the table, the sight of Everton might initially surprise, but the club has spent a lot in recent seasons, and this has resulted in high wages and amortisation fees, which would result in a tighter budget for 2021-22. There would have to be a transition period in which clubs would adjust their spending behaviour to avoid having to face that cliff-face fall in spending. Such a scheme might also be seen as a disincentive for ambitious owners such as Farhad Moshiri at Everton and Wes Edens and Nassef Sawiris at Villa. And further fear among critics is that introducing such rules into the Premier League would further entrench existing financial advantages. But it could be taken out of the league's hands. If this is one of the suggested measures of an independent football regulator, one of the recommendations of the interim fan-led review report produced by the government, then cost controls will be a restriction the clubs have to learn to live with. For the next few days, you can get 50% off a subscription to The Athletic. See the link in the description.
Now, from my view in this video, it seems like having knowledge of this situation is not going to work, because you got to remember this past year, the top 5 clubs threatened to leave the Premier League and start their own Super League with teams from La Liga in Spain, the French Division 1, and other top teams just making their own league so they could go around and travel and make the biggest money. Remember, these owners are in the game to win, which is secondary, but mostly they want to make money. So that's why everyone hates being relegated, because one year I can make over $100 million and the next year I might make $6 million. Moving into that's one reason why people don't think promotion and relegation will work in Major League Soccer in the United States, because again, that's a foreign concept to this country. And again, the ownership is about monetization of their ownership. So in our last segment, we're going to watch how or if promotion and relegation will be possible within Major League Soccer located within the United States and Canada.
Few things get people going in the world of U.S. soccer like a discussion on promotion relegation. And with the recent news of fan uprisings in Europe bringing an end to the short-lived European Super League, the discussion has once again been ignited. Can MLS, a league that was founded as single-entity closed system, ever transfer to the pro-rel model like the leagues in Europe? Today we are going to look at the business, logistic, and infrastructure obstacles standing in the way of an MLS promotion relegation model on this edition of The Yank Report. What's up? My name is Sam. Welcome to The Yank Report, the show where we talk about the U.S. national team, U.S. soccer in the United States, all of that good stuff. And of course, this is the granddaddy of all the U.S. soccer conversations in pro-rel. So if you're into this sort of thing, please hit the subscribe button so we can see you again. And if you're enjoying this video so far and you feel like you're going to enjoy it in the future, hit that like button. It's probably the coolest thing you can do in the next 5 seconds. So if MLS were ever to transfer to a promotion relegation league, the first and most significant hurdle that would have to be overcome is the structure of the league itself. See, in Europe, clubs are independently owned and largely independently operated. Think about them like restaurants in a food court. In a food court, the restaurants are required to pay rent to the food court, but after that, the food court has little say in how the individual restaurants are run, and they have no right to the profits that the restaurants make within the food court. Like a food court, European leagues operate merely as third-party governing bodies, with no stake in the individual clubs. By contrast, MLS is a single-entity league. Team owners are not technically team owners, they are shareholders who serve as team operators. Think about it like buying a McDonald's franchise. You can't just buy any building and put it anywhere and call it a McDonald's. There are many corporate rules and regulations that must be followed. Like a corporate franchise partner, the league office is not just a third-party governing body, but also an owner with a major say in how the club is allowed to operate. For these reasons, in order for MLS to switch to a pro-rel model, teams in the lower divisions in the United States would have to buy in to the franchise system, which would mean a significant investment to the league office in the neighborhood of $300 million. At least that's what the figure is right now. There's no telling what that number could be in a few years' time. But it's not quite that simple. Just like buying a McDonald's franchise, MLS doesn't grant everyone with the money access to the franchise. There are many considerations that must be met in order to make sure that the franchise is given the best chance to succeed and works well within the larger context of the league. Which brings us to our next major hurdle: logistics. Geographically speaking, the United States is an enormous country. Ask any veteran of European football about the most difficult part of playing in MLS, and they'll most always say it's the grueling travel schedule. While in Europe, teams are generally able to travel by bus to every away game, in America, this is simply not possible. To give some context, one of the longest travel days for the EPL is Brighton to Newcastle, roughly 6 hours in a bus across the entire country of England. In the United States, LAFC opened up their regular season with a game against Inter Miami. LA to Miami is roughly a 5-hour plane ride. Because of the sheer physical size and the financial burden of travel within the United States, almost all the leagues in this country are broken up into divisions and conferences to ensure that the majority of the games are played within reasonable travel distances. In order to ensure that these travel distances are maintained, American franchises are spaced out as logistically efficient as possible. Disrupting this spacing could result in competitive disadvantage for teams without nearby neighbors. For instance, assume that MLS adopts a pro-rel model within 5 years. And within those 5 years, Atlanta United, Orlando City, and all 3 Texas teams are relegated, and in their place, 5 West Coast teams are promoted. Suddenly, the travel burden is lessened on the West Coast teams, whereas with Inter Miami, they have to face significant travel time for every road game, and the entire East-West balance of the conferences is thrown off. For those reasons, it's likely that any pro-rel system in MLS would require the pro-rel to occur regionally rather than league-wide. Now, that's assuming that all lower division teams would be able to handle the financial burden of the MLS travel schedule, which is no easy task. But assuming all lower division sides are able and willing to pay the franchise fee and a regional relegation system is established, allowing for reasonable interleague travel, there is still another significant hurdle to overcome, and that is infrastructure. See, while the majority of European clubs were established over 100 years ago and have established fan bases, stadiums, league offices, practice facilities, soccer clubs in the United States are relatively new ventures. When a new MLS club enters the league, stadiums, team offices, practice fields, academy systems all must be built and in place before the team can take the field. This requires an enormous amount of financial capital to begin construction, and although league owners may be wealthy individuals, large-scale projects like these will always require securing loans from financial institutions. In the past, the uncertain future of MLS has made securing loans difficult, but these days, the strength of the league has helped reduce some of that risk for investors. However, if pro-rel is introduced, the risk profile for these loans is changed dramatically. We don't know for sure if an Inter Miami or an Austin SC would be able to obtain the financing to build their stadiums and offices if there was a chance they could be relegated. Assuming that lower division teams are willing to meet the MLS entry fees, assuming some regional pro-rel system is established, and assuming MLS clubs are willing to waive their financial security, is having pro-rel right now worth what we will be giving up? I mean, don't get me wrong, it would be absolutely amazing for MLS to introduce the drama and entertainment that only pro-rel could provide. It would be absolutely incredible if we had a strong enough lower division that MLS clubs could survive the drop without risking financial ruin. But is it worth risking the current investment into stadiums and academy systems that we are seeing across the league right now? Ultimately, I can't answer that question for you. It's for each individual fan to decide. And the purpose of this video is not to make a case for or against pro-rel. My goal is only to provide some context to this discussion, because it's not as if MLS can just flip a switch and suddenly introduce pro-rel. There are an enormous amount of legal, logistical, and financial obstacles that are standing in the way. Is it possible? Yes, it is absolutely possible, but it's also possible for Bruce Arena to become the next coach of Real Madrid. It is possible, it's just highly, highly unlikely. And look, soccer is growing rapidly in this country, and maybe there will come a time in the future where America's soccer infrastructure has matured to the point where Pro Rel can no longer be denied. Maybe a new league comes along with a Pro Rel foundation that eventually overtakes MLS in popularity. We don't know what the future holds. All we know for sure is that at this moment in time, Pro Rel and MLS is not going to happen anytime soon. Guys, that's
Now, I agree with the video that Pro Rel will not happen because, again, the U.S. soccer pyramid isn't that strong yet. And second, I think there's other ways the U.S. can be innovative and trying to be better than the Premier League and some of these other leagues. For example, taking advantage of diaspora. In every other sport in the United States, professional sport, they take advantage of the African diaspora group. And that is the group that are affected by the transatlantic slave trade. In basketball, football, even baseball now, if it's not a United States, but other North American or Caribbean countries, Dominican Republic, etc. So the United States has to open up its soccer program to the diaspora. Secondly, again, involving elements of free play to get the game faster and more in sync with basketball and the other major sports, where sort of like the Brazilians did in the 90s, where you have individuals doing tricks on the ball, just making an entertaining game to watch on the pitch that's fast-paced, high scoring, a lot of shots on goal. I think that can be to get the competitive edge, and by doing that, you can attract people from other sports, in particular football and basketball, that may be cut and have a lot of athletic life in their bodies. So in closing, that's a look at the promotion and relegation in English Premier League soccer and a comparison of the economics and how that would affect Major League Soccer, which is not ready for. Again, thank you for getting social with Sports 101 and the litany of other shows on SportsZone Chicago. Please follow SportsZone Chicago on social media, on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. I am Jamar Harp, and this is another episode of Sports 101. We'll see you next week at our normally scheduled time, Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, and I'm gone.